you may notice this rather radical costume change. These films are not being shot sequentially, and they're also being shot over a very long time, and now it's come into winter. I'm dressed accordingly, but I still have the chesty bonds underneath. Now, we've been rabbiting on for some time about rust in the back end of the chassis and what's the best way to go about it. I found a solution. I'm going to need assistance with it, and here it is. An entire back end and 1 foot little extensions, which will replace all the rusted stuff. Alright, we'll fit that into place. Roughly about there. So, with our new rear cross member and our 2 little extensions that go forth about 1 foot, they lock into place like that. And then a more skilled man than myself will weld that on. And they also slot over the existing chassis. So it seems to me we could almost cut further back and just have this one go over top, maybe, is what I'm thinking is a possibility. There's also a little bottom cap that fits over like that once everything's in place and welded on. There is a little hitch though, because these spring hangers, they'll also have to be attached, and so with that plate, maybe we could just like cut it into sections and fill in the gaps. Now, in order to have all this lined up properly, and it has to be, that's essential, I've constructed a little cage or a skeleton, and that fits like such. Oh, this is it. And we fit the inner parts of that angle iron like this. Make sure it's all lined up correctly, and then you can see this last piece of angle iron here is at the right height and the right length for where that cross member needs to be once it's in place, clamped on in preparation for welding. And on the subject of welding, I've actually done some. Feast your eyes upon these magnificents. It has taken me a few goes, and they're structurally not sound whatsoever, but they are stuck on, and that's pretty cool for me. So also with lining up the back of the chassis, it's equally important for our 2 new Outriggers to go on exactly as the old ones were. So I've built what I would call a thingamajig, or a contraption. This angle iron stretches across here and is seated on some more expertly welded feet that connect with the chassis. And then this plate here that has 2 bolts through it so it can't move or jiggle like such is then bolted to this original Outrigger, as on the other side as well. So it's my hopes that when the time comes that we take the bolt out, we leave this in place, we cut off the old Outrigger, put on the new one, and when that's welded on, it should be able to bolt in straight away like that and be perfect, so that the bulkhead can be fitted without problem. Alright, likewise we have here the Outrigger for the fuel tank, and this comes with a nice big plate here, which is like extra chassis. Now you can see where the original one was, that big hole there which is rust, and what I've done is brutally attacked it with a file, carved out all the dirty stuff down to good metal. So when we put this on and it welds in place, that shouldn't matter. Now notice here that these flaps are quite wide, and when we try to connect it in place, they interfere with the Outrigger, who also on the new one has little flaps. So we're going to have to cut some of that off, and so it'll fit into place. And once we've got it tacked in, we're going to put the fuel tank in there and just make sure that it's all going to fit. Now, with this front Outrigger, we'll notice that the hole's already dug, but we haven't got any holes drilled for the brake master cylinder. So we're going to need to do that. And you'll notice also this reinforcing plate that someone's welded onto that Outrigger. And I don't see why something like that needs to be welded on. And so if there are any issues, then I think later on we could cut a plate and just have it bolted on. But not drilling these holes in before we weld on the Outrigger will cause problems, because this one sits just behind it and you won't be able to get a drill in there. That could be quite problematic. So we're going to drill the holes. we've got our outrigger here, and you just got to remember that the brake master cylinder goes through that way, so you want to make sure you drill the holes on the right side, because you'll be feeling pretty silly. And we have something interesting here. We have the original brake master cylinder, and that's got 3 holes. And then we have the new one, which came with the car, or the replacement, and that's got 2. So you can see that the original and both the new one have holes, 1 hole on top. So that should line up perfectly. And my conundrum is that with 2 different types, and if this one doesn't work out, then I'm thinking I'm going to drill 4 holes so I could fit either model in case that I have to replace this one and I can't find another one that's got the 2 holes. And secondly, I've priced them, and the 3-hole ones are much more expensive than this one, and quite often that's an indication of the quality. I can't say for sure, but I'd rather be prepared. If this one fails me, then I can go for the ones that's got 3 holes in it. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. So we have to mark them very carefully, and you'll notice that as I stick that in there and line it up, I can't get my pen in there. Eh? Oh my word, but if I turn it around, make sure it's really straight, and then I can mark it. All right. So we'll go and get a centre punch, and then we'll drill a hole. Right, I'm going to start off with a smaller drill than what I need, just to get the hole started. Sure, it's not supposed to do that. Is that a rough life? So we've got our 5 holes drilled for our brake master cylinders, so we can choose either the 2-bolt or 3-bolt options at any time. And I think I'm just going to clean them up with a file, because this bolt here is roughly what fits into this. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so they're a little tight. They're a little tight here. Let's give it a filing. Maybe a little extra drilling just around the edges. Okay, now I suppose we better stick them in and test them. Like that. Bolt in there. Marvellous. Look at that. Bring that in like that. 1, 2. Oh. And we got that. Look at that. Perfect. So this one will be almost ready, pretty much, to weld onto the chassis when I can find an experienced fabricator. Back in warmer weather, saw the removal of one of the slightly buggered outriggers, and considering its fragile state, the task was not so difficult. So we're in very close quarters here. You can see that I've sliced off that excess piece of metal, and now this fuel tank holding outrigger can fit in there without interfering with that front one, and that'll get clamped into place roughly in that location. And you can see, as I was whinging about earlier, the narrow gap that the brake master cylinder has to squeeze into to be installed, and there's no way you could drill those holes if if this was all welded into place and all locked in, so best done earlier. So I don't see any reason why I shouldn't try and cut off this outrigger and prepare it for welding and get in amongst the steering wheel. Woo. There we go, that looks shit house. So we've got a massive big rust hole in the side of the chassis there. And the good news, I think, is, well, no, not really good news, but we'll just have to see how bad that is, cut it out, and then assess what we're going to do. Provided that it's structurally sound on either side, it's probably going to be all right. Okay, well, might get the grinder onto it. All right, so here I am in a pair of coveralls. And this is how you know you're dealing with a professional. It's got nothing to do with skill. It's all in the look. Okay, let's go and see if we can clean this thing up without damaging the clothes I was in. Don't have an extensive wardrobe. You've got to kind of protect what I've got. Probably need the ear things as well at some stage. I'm going to cut out this little square here, and hopefully I can get the vacuum cleaner in there and get out some of that nasty crud. But it does kind of look like around the rust hole's not so bad, and that's promising to me. I think. Oh dear. Don't. Oh. I don't know how I went so long without a grinder in my life. Here we go. Yep, that's hot and sharp. So, let's put this outrigger into position and see, got our lines. Then this bolt here has to slide through there easily. So that's about where it needs to be. Now it's got a slight downward tilt to it. You can see this little gap that's just there. Now my proposal would be to the welder, if I held it like this and he tacked it, then that still slid like this, which is a good thing. We could weld the bottom, weld the top where it connects to the metal, and then maybe with some kind of metal rod, we could bash these little edges closer into the metal, and then he can finish the welding, and hopefully everything stays in place. So that's where that one's going to live. That guy is going to sit here, and I think we're pretty close to just getting straight into it. So the next task that we're hoping to achieve is to cut off these here back struts, and then we'll have to shift those, what do you call them, those car stands forward, and then eventually cut off this back cross member so when the welder turns up he can just do the job and go home. All right, so that's going to be there's going to be a bit of steel to grind off there, but like I said, I want to salvage these platforms here. I don't want to have to try and find a new one of them anywhere. Now that we've got the chassis kind of cleaned up as much as we can, it's time to start thinking a little harder. So firstly, these pieces are going to fit about there, which you can see is that they come too far this way because we want to keep this. So we're going to mark this back about there, and then we're going to cut it shorter. So we're going to cut this off. That way it'll sit back a little further, and in theory this slots over. All right. One really important thing that we have to remember are the spring hangers. The distancing between the front and the back is very important, so constructed a contraption. Right. Now if you remember that frame that's going to go across here, that was $60 in steel. So this one's out of wood, with a bolt through the front spring hanger and a bolt that goes through the back, giving us the exact distance of where to weld the old one on. Right? Magic. Bit of scrap wood in the yard. All right. So my intentions are, the rot is in this area here. That's where the rot is. So I'm thinking of keeping as much as I can and maybe cutting from about there, and then I think the rot extends a little higher than where that hole is. So I'm thinking of maybe I'll come across here like this, and then this hole at the top here, I think maybe I'll cut that out. So then maybe come in here and across there. So that's the goal. That's the goal to start with, is to keep this, if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but what's going to happen is once this back end's cut off, then we're going to slot it over and just see how it sits. And then if we don't need to cut off any more steel, then that's a good thing. And rather than cut off too much. That's where I am with this. Bluffing my way through. We do have a little issue that we need to sort out, because I don't have my saucy assistant with me at all, and these axle stands are at the back that needs to be cut off, so they need to be moved up this way, and then we can cut the back off and it's all the chassis supported rather than it just sort of collapsing on the ground. So I'll remove that chock on the front wheel, and hopefully this is going to work. Don't try this at home. Oh, at about there. Huh? If I re-chop the wheels, I think we're good. So I have to confess that this job here has intimidated the life out of me. It really has. I've procrastinated on this for quite some time, and been very scared to do it. But I just got to bite the bullet and go ahead. See how we go. Well, looks like we found where our friend the rat lived. All this enormous amount of nesting material all shoved into the left-hand side of the chassis at the back. Just after the strip down and the discovery of evil rust, a magnificent larder was found within the rear crossmember. It's like a 20-kilo bag's been shoved in there. The result of a very busy rodent preparing for tough times ahead. Yep, it was quite a luxury mansion. Even the most careful, well laid out plans are subject to becoming a debacle, and that's what we have here. So my replacement chassis parts, I got very excited and jumped into the job and cut them too short. You can see that gap here between the new metal and the old, and on the right hand side there's a good 3 or 4 inches of extra rust I discovered and had to cut out. Considering that's how much that I cut off that particular piece, that's a lot of wasted steel and a wasted part. So I've had to go and order myself another 2, which came actually quicker than I would have expected. To avoid making this mistake again, I created a cardboard template over top of the original piece. Then putting that on the chassis, I could then cut around those obstacles, and this is a reversible piece, so I can do it for the other side as well. And then, when it goes back onto the original, I can mark it down there and down there. So only a little bit of steel is going to come off with that angle, and then hopefully it should fit with the maximum amount of metal available to be welded on. I am hoping that this new plan is going to be a winner. With the stars, moon and planets all aligned, well, the metal stuff, it appears we might be ready to proceed to the next scary step. So having gone as far as my abilities will allow, and having done all the preparation that I can foresee, it's time to hand this job over to higher powers and summon forth the welder.